Greetings fanboys and fangirls, Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever, and today we complete our trilogy of Masters of the Universe PowerCon reviews from the 2021 convention with the Masters of the Universe Mysteries of Grayskull box set. Let's go ahead and look at the outer shipping box. First of all, you can see that it has kind of a wood grain design, almost as if Masters of the Universe were etched into it, and it just looks really nice like the other shipping boxes that we saw. However, this one doesn't really feature a whole lot of like character art or anything, just some more binding on the side and wood grain on the back. Latches down here, there's bolts, a little Masters Universe logo up here. It's not really meant to show a bunch of characters, so it's not quite as fun as some of the other art that we've seen on the shipper boxes. Let's get right to the box art that counts. And if the shipping box had left anything to be desired, well, the actual packaging more than makes up for it. Look at this. We have one of the most detailed paintings from any of the packaging in Masters of the Universe that I've seen in years. And of course, this is meant to simulate the dungeon grate from the classic sticker in the Castle Grayskull playset. Now, of course, many folks were disappointed that they didn't do more with that dungeon grate in the Origins version of the playset. And of course, the Four Horsemen had always intended to sculpt a real deal version of it for the classics. So let's go ahead and look at the packaging closely. You can see that not only is this a beautiful painting, but it's actually embossed and has that kind of 3D feel to it. And you can see each of the creatures that's staring out of the dungeon gate trying to get out, and this is just beautiful. I absolutely love all of this. On the side, we just get some of the kind of goo and slime. Beware the Dwell of Souls. So that is really cool. You have the Explorer spacesuit in ancient cosmic armor. You also have the Orlax of Primeria, a mysterious creature from the Dwell of Souls. And what's cool about this is they kind of got into the Orlax a little bit on the second half of Masters of the Universe Revelations. So it's kind of cool to see it represented here as well. And then we have the Spirit of Grayskull, which is the manifestation of Castle Grayskull itself. Just a little bit about the origin of all of these different things. You, of course, have had the sticker that has represented this for years and years in the original Castle Grayskull playset. And then they took it a step further with Masters Universe Classics by giving us a non-posable version of it, which we'll get into later. I have it for comparison. And this is something that we've seen in some of the mini comics that kind of floats over Grayskull. And then, of course, this represents that dungeon grate, only the Orlax tentacle is kind of coming straight through it. So let's go ahead and get this thing out of the packaging. I love how all three of the exclusives this year kind of have a different mechanism for how you get to it. This just opens up in the front. And just very quickly, before we look at the figure inside, you can see that this is kind of the other side of the dungeon grate. It's worth noting that if you take the bubble tray out, you do get this cool Castle Grayskull background, so I like that. So very clearly, this set is very different than the others because instead of being a figure-focused set, this is more of an expansion pack for the previously released Castle Grayskull playset. It's the kind of thing that I wish companies would do much more often. With that in mind, of course, I'm going to have Castle Grayskull in the background. And we're going to be showing you how all of these things integrate into the castle itself. Let's begin with the Spirit of Grayskull. There's probably the least going on with the Spirit of Grayskull because you're essentially getting a sculpture to put on the castle. Of course, it's very true to those original drawings of what the Spirit of Grayskull would look like kind of coming up from the castle. Here they make it a little bit more of like an aqua green than we've seen it in the past. In previous art and things, it looked more like a cloud. But I believe that this is meant to evoke more of that classic green color scheme from the castle itself, and I definitely think it was a cool artistic change. So let's look at all the sculpted detail. First of all, you have the actual like skull face, which makes sense since Castle Grayskull has a skull face, so this is, I guess, what, the soul or what? And this is kind of a hard plastic part right here, and it's, you know, kind of hollowy feeling, and that's this entire section right here leading to this cool base. I love all the swirling kind of energy, and it almost looks like, you know, wispy smoke coming up, just like that original art. And so it is very accurate. On the back, you have the same sort of thing with all the little smoke plumes, and almost like a smoke that is on fire. So it's really nice. The one thing is that kind of in translation, you sort of lose some of this area, the nose and the eyes. And depending on the lighting, see like that, you can more see the shadow making the eyes right there. But if you have direct, like head-on lighting, like my studio light here, then you're gonna lose some of that. It's just something to be aware of. Also, these on the sides are like little smoke tendril thingies, and they're made of completely like rubberized plastic that's been fused onto the main hard plastic part. What's great is that from a distance, you would never even be able to tell that these weren't one piece, and it makes these a lot more durable, because if they had just been that hard plastic, I could see these taking a dive off your shelf and then all of a sudden snap. It's funny, it kind of reminds me of the Parallax Build-A-Figure parts that you would get with the Green Lantern Movie Master figures, you know, years and years and years ago. Of course, as you can see, usually on top of Castle Grayskull, they have the turret. All you have to do is just unplug that, and now you're ready to set the Spirit of Grayskull attachment on top. This attachment point just sets on that peg, so it just gives it a little bit more durability. And you can see the Spirit of Grayskull attached right onto the top of the castle, and it looks really cool. You can see the tendril is sculpted to just kind of rest on top of the actual skull head, but that's not the only spot you can attach it at. I took off the little flag, and you can move it to the other side. Here we have what appears to be the intended spot for the Spirit of Grayskull attachment. I think it looks wonderful here because it's the higher tower. And here it is zoomed out completely from my review station. As you can see, it adds quite a bit of height to the top of Castle Grayskull, but it really does look great, and it kind of gives it a little something that it almost seems to have been missing before now. If you open it up, here's a look at what that would be like. Keep in mind that you can easily turn it around if you want the Spirit of Grayskull to be facing outwards towards the rest of the display. It may not be for everybody, but as for me, I'm definitely going to be keeping the Spirit of Grayskull attachment on the castle at all times. Next up, we have the Orlax and Dungeon Grate accessory. Now, as you can see in the original playset, it did come with a sticker that was just kind of a more animated looking version of the original sticker that you got with the castle. It's fine, and it certainly mimics what the original did, but of course this has always been a sore spot for Masters fans because we always thought there could be something cool that would go right there. Well, this is our opportunity to have that very thing. Before we place it though, I do want us to look at a couple of components of this. It comes in two pieces. One is the grate itself, and one is the Orlax. Let's look at the grate itself. As you can see, the Orlax is easily detachable, and then you're just left with kind of a basic grate. You can open it up, it just hinges right out there, and there's a little depression right there where the Orlax could go, and it closes back, and it holds relatively well. You can see it's not going to stay completely tight, but tight enough. At the bottom, you can see that this is where you're going to sort of slide it over, and it looks really cool like this, which is probably how I may keep it most of the time, but I'm not sure. So the Orlax is really interesting. Once again, you have a hybrid of this hard plastic and this more rubbery plastic, but this time there is actually kind of a bendy wire in there. So you can see that the tendril can at least partially hold the pose that you put it in. It's not the kind of thing I want to go crazy with. I kind of know how these things work after a while, and you don't want to go so crazy that you end up breaking the internal wire or something like that. Some companies make them very strong, some don't. You just never really know. And especially since this is a con item, I don't want to go too berserk, but you definitely could probably grasp a figure with this tentacle, and it would probably hold it just fine. As a matter of fact, here is the Explorer spacesuit entangled in it, and it's holding the weight very well. So definitely it will hold a figure, even like this, as it would be posed over the grate. Other than that, the paint tampographic is applied very nicely with the eye there. Believe it or not, something that simple actually could get messed up quite a bit because of all of that kind of blank yellow space. I'm surprised there's not any kind of slop or misapplication, and everything looks relatively centered, so that's actually a really nice surprise. Sculpting is really good as well on this thing. As you can see, there's little bumps and crevices. It looks very crustacean-esque, so I'm really glad that they put a lot of effort and time into this. And it seems very durable as well, so I have no complaints about the Orlax tentacle. There's two different things you can do with it. As we saw before, you can actually very easily choose any of these sections of the grate, and it clips in. So not only can I do the center one, which is of course the most obvious choice, I could go over to the side, I could go over to the top left here. There's just all kinds of choices where you want this thing. So it does give you a lot of flexibility as if it's coming out from the middle portion or any portion of the grate. But there's also another option. You can have the grate opened up and you can put it directly into this little depression right here. And very easily it goes right there, Well, the gate kind of stays propped open by the beast itself, so you do have plenty of options here. Now to show the actual installation into the castle, you just kind of slide it and fit it over top of the old area where you had that dungeon sticker. And once you hear that click, you know that it's in there securely. I think very intentionally it leaves just enough room for a figure to come in through the drawbridge there and still be able to enter the castle without being obstructed. So a figure could very easily still stand in the entryway, and it still looks very natural, only blocking just a tiny little portion of that original entryway area. So I think that was a very measured sacrifice on their part. So can it open without hitting on the ceiling portion? Yes, it clears it very well with no problem. Can the Orlax attachment actually fit down there? Well, if we have the grate open, which would be the combination that would be most likely to fit in, it's kind of a super tight fit and you cannot leave it extended. You instead have to bend it down and kind of let it rest against the top there. Even taking the bendy wire, trying to put it down, it doesn't quite work. Oddly enough, you end up having to kind of stretch it over this way. It's kind of messy to get it in like this. Instead, this might be an option. Simply open the trap door, attach the Orlax. Your trap door has just become a much bigger hazard in the castle. This is a great idea and was an awesome way for them to solve this particular engineering problem. And of course, it's a very simple matter to get creative with your posing and do things like that. So I think that's really fun, and I think it's a cool option that you can have. As for me, I probably won't keep the Orlax attachment actually on the thing. Instead, I'll probably just remove it and still have a nice little 3D dungeon grate. I'm so glad to have this attachment to the castle, and it definitely helps, I think, the overall visual. The one thing I would say is, for as cool as I think the Orlax attachment is, I do wish that more focus had been given to just doing 3D representations of the things that we see on the box, the things that are trying to escape the Dwell of Souls. So I think that would have probably been more my kind of thing. I know that here they probably thought this was a cooler opportunity to kind of add a play feature to the castle, and I definitely understand that as well. For me, I would have loved all those multicolored monsters kind of coming up from the grate like we saw on the box. I think that would have been incredible. And it's something that, you know, I still hope we can see it done eventually, someday, somehow. And that leads me to the main point of interest for me for this set. It was to finally get that mysterious suit of Space Knight's armor that we saw in the castle from the very beginning. Of course, it was always represented as a sticker, but then eventually there was some attempts to get it made as a figure. Didn't exactly pan out. It got close. Great to finally see this thing in all of its wild, multicolored glory. So let's go ahead and have a look at the Explorer spacesuit. It's funny because as I look at this figure, it's very difficult for me to kind of naturally just call it the Explorer spacesuit. As a matter of fact, I've had to look at the box a couple of different times. It's very odd to me because the thing has never really had a name. The closest we ever got was Scott Knightlick, the toy guru, saying that he believed it was Trollan armor from the planet Tralla, and that was kind of his take on it, and that's as close as I've ever come to giving it an identity. I'm sure that there's some more behind the scenes stuff out there, and a lot of you all probably know some more of the history of this particular inclusion, but for me, that's as far as it ever went. The new name also raises the question of whether or not this is even supposed to be a figure of a character per se, but instead just a representation of an empty suit. But I'll get more into what I think this means a little bit later on. Looking at the figure itself, the details are pretty much all there that we saw on that original sticker, and in the years since, all the different interpretations we've seen of this guy. You have the very cool kind of deep sea diver turn of the century style helmet. You have the little breathing apparatus. You have the Darth Vader-esque like chest computer. You have the big belt, the funny kind of robot legs, a couple liberties taken with the boots here. You have the gauntlets that have the crazy pink details here, the green gloves. Moving on to the back, more details on the helmet. You have these kind of little oxygen tanks, like these cylinders, and that's pretty much it. There's even a little rocket here on the side. Overall, I think he does fit the bill for that original kind of art that we saw on the sticker, even if it couldn't recreate every single tiny little detail. Let's go over the articulation really quick because it is kind of a typical figure. We do have a little bit of up and down movement. It can go all the way around, but this hose right here is connected. You can detach it though, and it just looks like this, and it can go all the way around quite easily, and then of course you can reattach it. With these arms, the armor kind of hinders it a little, but not that much moving out. It hinders it more trying to go forward, and they're a little flexible, but that's about all you can comfortably do. So you're not going to have them doing jumping jacks or anything like that. You can see that it does kind of twist here at the elbow, and we do get a single joint, and we do get a hinge. It can go all the way around at the hand. We do get a waist swivel. We can do the splits. The leg does move up very easily. We do get a single jointed knee. We also get a swivel at the knee. We get a boot cut, and we get some hinges, which are pretty well blocked a lot of the times by these boot cuffs. So it kind of doesn't work all that well, but certainly well enough to get your basic stances. And let's see if I can do it first try. Yep. So you can see that it's really not that bad. Then with the missile on his gauntlet, you actually can rotate it around, and you can even detach it. It just kind of leaves a little hole there. The paint definitely looks very striking and vivid. Maybe a little much in some places, kind of taking it into the realm of more of the super bright, and maybe it could have stood to have been toned down just a tad. Not only that, but some of the paint is kind of inconsistently applied, particularly this orange. You have minor things like up here where the paint spray doesn't meet the very edge of the helmet, and that's not a big deal. But you do have bigger problems, like this being a really solid orange, and the other shoulder pad being kind of a duller orange. Do you see that? And the same thing is true with the way that the actual chest was sprayed. On the back, you can see that there's kind of some sections that didn't get very good coverage, and there's better coverage over here. And it almost looks like you can see the orange paint is kind of bunched up under the tanks. I think overall there was some weird decisions that had to be made about which paint was going to be what. Of course, this is, I believe, silver plastic, and then the orange was sprayed over it, and it leads to little slop and things like that right there. Overall, it's not a huge deal, and there's a little bit right there, but it's kind of death by a thousand cuts sort of thing, and it kind of ends up making the figure look a little sloppy. That same kind of thing happens on the boots down here. It's not quite that bad. You can see that this orange doesn't quite meet, so there's definitely some paint inconsistencies on this guy. And it's something that we've come to, I think, expect, but it's not something that I think any of us like very much. At least they did go to the trouble of making sure that the yellow here met the yellow here instead of just making this a completely silver piece. They could have easily done that, so I do appreciate that kind of effort being put in to make the paint consistent. Overall, the suit is supposed to be kind of, you know, an old relic, I guess, that's in the past, so maybe you can tell yourself that some of that paint inconsistency is just it, you know, kind of just degrading after a while, you know, so you can sleep at night. Overall, some of the paint application is pretty sloppy, so that's a little disappointing. Not a deal breaker though. So looking at the armor, can you actually unlatch it and take it off? Well, let's find out. First of all, we'll want to detach the helmet, which is easily taken off just like any head. And under it, looks like this guy is a little jaundiced. He's got kind of a yellow bodysuit underneath it. And yeah, it looks kind of interesting. I'll just show you the helmet back on it, which is really funny. And looks like he's some kind of intergalactic wrestler or something. But, you know, it's pretty neat, I guess. It's a ridiculously simple matter to take the chest armor and put it on any figure. You can see it looks really cool on He-Man here because it kind of brings out the orange bracers and the belt very nicely. So that's a neat look. Although the intention of this figure may be for it to be an empty spacesuit, I do think that there's a really cool opportunity here. It says that this is kind of an explorer spacesuit that is ancient cosmic armor. So maybe if you're in control of Castle Grayskull, you also get access to this, meaning that you could then visit space. So I do think that with the line being so modular, that the intention here is that you just simply pop off the helmet head, and all of a sudden, any character can get a space explorer suit. That's right, it's their take on New Adventures. I would actually love to see a New Adventures He-Man done with the Origins style. I think that would be really cool. You can see the head just fits on just like any other Masters figure. Of course, this kind of oxygen tube gets in the way, and you can't detach it from this little box down here. It is glued in. Instead, you can easily just put it to the side like this, or you could kind of stuff it into the collar. And in honor of Scott Toy Guru Nightlick, Here, my friend, is your Trawlin armor. That's right, Orko. He can now go on all those wonderful space adventures. Oh, gee, fellas. I'm gonna go to Mars now. Not to mention Macho Man here, who can finally explore space, as we all know was his true destiny. Here's Skeletor shortly before New Adventures He-Man burns his face off. And here's Rowdy Roddy Piper being angry that he is in space. I can assure you that Beastman is so horrified right now. It is slightly disappointing that the Space Explorer armor did not come with a weapon beyond the missile here. I think it would have been cool if he'd come with some kind of blaster or even a laser sword. Still though, I think the figure turned out very nicely. And what kind of fan would I be if I didn't set this guy in his proper place? Now, a lot of folks were disappointed when the actual Castle Grayskull playset did not include a sticker representation of him. Little did we know that Mattel was deep in development on the figure as we reviewed it. So let's go ahead and see how it looks. And here he is utilizing that foot peg from the corner right beside the computer, which is where we've always seen him in the past. I think it looks really good, and I think he looks excellent over there, just as he was intended to. Of course, he's a great natural fit for the background elements of those great scenes where He-Man and Skeletor are hashing it out over the throne of Grayskull. Fantastic stuff, and definitely filling in a missing element from the playset. Kind of a funny coincidence, you can see that the Spirit of Grayskull, the Space Explorer armor, and the Dungeon Grate are all expansions for the right side of the playset rather than the left. Clearly, there must have been unfinished business on the right side of Castle Grayskull, so just kind of one of those funny coincidences. And talk about an unlikely comparison time, but here it is. You can see that we have the original Masters of the Universe Classics version, and what this is not an actual figure, but instead kind of a hollowed out accessory that was just meant to peg into the side of Castle Grayskull. To have that visual there without needing a sticker or anything, it of course looks 10 times better than a sticker. It is just a cool kind of sculpted element that goes in the background, and always, I thought, did a great job at serving the purpose that it was supposed to. According to Toy Guru himself, they came very close to doing a full-on, completely articulated Masters Universe Classics version of this guy, but this is as far as they ever got. This means that this is indeed the very first fully articulated figural representation of the Explorer spacesuit or mysterious Castle Grayskull Knight or whatever you want to call him. I don't think we'll ever really have something that's a universal term. And they chose in this set not to give him a specific name. So I think that was probably for the best, and that way people can continue just as they did when they were younger to sort of imagine who he was supposed to be. Visually, I like things about both of them. I do like sort of this more subdued color scheme, and instead of orange, the brass I think looks a lot better and probably would have looked a lot better for this guy. But then again, this kind of goes with the more kind of mature look of Masters Universe Classics versus the more flamboyant, kind of retro-y look that Origins frequently goes for. So I do think it's appropriate in a way. I think the one thing that throws me off is the really large amount of yellow here. I feel like that if these little pads here on the biceps had maybe been silver, that would have really helped sell the complete like silver bodysuit of armor just a little bit better. And I think that's more apparent when I see these guys side by side. Still, really love both of them, and I think they're both cool in their own way. They're just very different. So that was my review of the Masters of the Universe Mysteries of Grayskull PowerCon 2021 box set. Overall, looking at this as a set, it's probably one of the most eclectic things ever assembled for a single toy line. You have 3 incredibly disparate things all brought together by the Castle Grayskull playset. It's such a great idea that they were able to come up with 3 very meaningful additions to Grayskull, and I really enjoy all 3 of them in their own right. It's really cool that all 3 of them are something so different. You have kind of an added visual flourish that's like an extra sculpture that you attach to the castle. You have a new bit of geography for the castle with kind of another little action feature almost. And then you have a flat out new figure that is meant to be decoration for the castle, but can also be used as its own character. When the PowerCon exclusives were announced all those months ago, and it does seem like forever ago, then I was very excited. However, by far, none of them even remotely compared to my excitement for this particular set. I'm happy to say that for the most part, my excitement was well justified. I do still feel that this was the set with the most reasonable price, with the retail being $50. But by the time that you paid shipping or went to someplace like Big Bad Toy Store, sometimes that cost could go from $80 to $90. But there's something about that that seems a little easier to swallow, since you're getting a figure, you're getting a large kind of sculpture that goes onto it, and a very kind of large diorama piece. It seems a little more reasonable, especially if you were able to grab one for $50 from Mattel Creations, which was by far the cheapest route to go. Because of its great value and the essential nature, at least in my opinion, for hardcore fans to get this thing for their Castle Grayskull, it's still the coolest one that they did for 2021, and I am very happy that I had the opportunity to grab one. However, I also realize that many folks were not that lucky, and of course I wish you all the luck in the world in securing this set for a reasonable cost. We all know, of course, that PowerCon items usually become much more rare as time goes on. So if you were going to hit up the secondary market, then now is probably a better time than any to do so, as bad as I hate to admit it. So here's something that I missed in my Duplicat and Leo figure review. If you take off the saddle from Duplicat, I just assumed it would be the same thing all throughout and didn't even bother. But it turns out that there is a huge tampographic detail, almost like a VHS tape, that's at the top, kind of like the robot part that's under Faker's armor. So this was excellent, and I'm very sorry I missed this. Either you guys didn't know either, or you were just being nice and decided not to get on to me in the comments over it. So here it is, and I apologize. Well, friends, I certainly hope that you've all enjoyed the review today, and don't forget to please like the video if you feel that I deserve it. And most important of all, be sure to subscribe. We have many more Masters of the Universe videos coming soon. And of course, a much requested video is coming very quickly, where I will finally look at all of the most recent Masters of the Universe Origins releases and have my Volume 3 of my ranking list, a video that I know a lot of you all have been looking forward to and asking me about. So I can't wait to get right into it. You may be surprised with some of my choices and revisions since Volume 2. Alright friends, with that in mind, God bless you and yours. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.
Oh, gee, fellas. I'm gonna go to Mars now.